One swing for every lie!
The sound of my own keys not working in the lock told me everything I needed to know. I stood there in the Texas heat, sweat already beating on my forehead at 7 in the morning, staring at the metal door of Ratliff's Iron, my gym, my life's work, my everything for the past 15 years. Looking for something, Dean? I turned around. Chloe stood there with that smile I used to love, the one that now looked like a knife blade catching sunlight. She was holding coffee in a brand new mug that read, New Management. What's going on here? I asked, though my gut already knew. Business decision, she said, taking a slow sip. The lease got transferred. Turns out your name wasn't on the renewal paperwork. My chest tightened. That's impossible. I signed everything you put in front of me. Did you read it, though? Her voice had that sing-song quality she used when she thought she was being clever. Because you signed over your ownership rights to me 6 months ago. Remember that stack of papers you called boring legal stuff? The world tilted sideways. 15 years of sweat and everything I had built, gone, just like that. You can't be serious. Dead serious, actually. She walked closer, close enough that I could smell her perfume mixed with the scent of betrayal. See, Dean, you were dead weight. And dead weight gets cut. Before I could respond, Kyle Martinez stepped out from behind their gym. 27 years old, sponsored athlete, social media darling with his perfect abs and his perfect smile. The kid I'd been training for free because I believed in his potential. Sorry, old man, Kyle said, not looking sorry at all. But this place needed someone who understands the modern fitness industry. I looked between them, my wife of 8 years and the athlete I'd mentored for 3. The betrayal hit harder than any weight I'd ever lifted. You two planned this? We planned a lot of things, Chloe said, her hand finding Kyle's arm. The gesture was casual, familiar. Too familiar. My hands clenched into fists. How long? Does it matter? Kyle shrugged. What matters is that this gym's about to become something special. Ratliff's Iron was stuck in the past. Martinez Fitness is the future. Martinez Fitness? The name felt like acid in my mouth. Has a nice ring to it, don't you think? Kyle pulled out his phone and started recording. Actually, this is perfect content. The old guard stepping aside for the new generation. Turn that thing off, I said. This is America, Dean. Public sidewalk, public content. Kyle kept filming, his voice taking on that influencer tone he used for his followers. What you're seeing here, guys, is a changing of the guard. Sometimes in business, you gotta cut the dead weight to let the real strength shine through. I stepped toward him. I said, turn it off. Or what? Kyle's smile was all teeth. You'll throw a tantrum? Prove my point about why this place needed new leadership? That's when I noticed the other guys. 2 of Kyle's gym buddies had materialized from somewhere, flanking him like bodyguards. Big guys, all tattoos and attitude. I think Dean needs to understand his new situation, one of them said. Yeah, said the other. Maybe take a walk around back so we can explain things clearly. I looked at Chloe. You're going to let this happen? I'm not letting anything happen, she said. I'm just not stopping it. The walk around back felt like a funeral march. Kyle kept his phone rolling, documenting everything for whatever twisted story he planned to tell his followers. The 2 goons, I didn't know their names and didn't care to learn them, stayed close enough that I could smell their protein powder and steroid sweat. Behind the gym, next to the dumpster where I used to throw away the old equipment I couldn't afford to fix, they made their point with fists and a metal pipe someone had grabbed from the construction site next door. I tried to fight back. At 42, I was still strong, still had the muscle memory from my army days. But 3 against 1 with weapons isn't a fair fight, and fairness wasn't what they were after anyway. The pipe caught me across the ribs first, then the kidneys. Kyle got in close for some face shots, while his boys held my arms. I tasted crimson red, felt my left eye swelling shut, heard my own breathing turn ragged. This is what happens when dead weight doesn't know it's dead, Kyle said, breathing hard. He was sweating now, his perfect image a little damaged by the violence. You stay away from this place. You stay away from Chloe, and you stay out of our business. Or next time, we won't be so gentle. They left me there next to the dumpster, bleeding onto the asphalt that used to be mine. Kyle's phone was still recording as they walked away, capturing what would probably become some kind of triumph video for his social media empire. I lay there for maybe 20 minutes, listening to the sound of cars passing by on the street, people going about their normal lives while mine collapsed around me. The Texas sun was already brutal, turning the asphalt into a griddle that cooked the warm liquid pooling under my head. When I finally managed to sit up, everything hurt. My ribs felt cracked, my face was a mess, and my pride was somewhere down around my ankles. But as I wiped the crimson red from my mouth with the back of my hand, something crystallized in my mind. "You better have eliminated me," I said to the empty lot, my voice hoarse but steady, "because if I get up from this, I'm taking everyone down." I got up. The drive home was a study in humiliation. Every red light gave me time to look at my face in the rearview mirror, left eye swollen nearly shut, split lip, bruises already turning purple along my jaw. My ribs screamed every time I breathed, and my hands shook on the steering wheel. Home wasn't much better. The duplex Chloe and I rented was half empty now. Her clothes were gone, her books, her coffee maker, all the little things that made a place feel lived in. What was left behind felt like a museum of my own stupidity. On the kitchen counter, she'd left a note. "Divorce papers are with Miller and Associates. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. See." I crumpled the note and threw it in the trash, then immediately dug it back out. I was going to need a lawyer too, and Miller and Associates was the only firm in town. Conflict of interest, but that was probably the point. My phone had been buzzing all morning. Text messages, missed calls, social media notifications. Kyle's video had gone viral. #deadweight was trending locally. The comments were brutal. "Old man got what he deserved. This is what happens when boomers can't adapt. Kyle Martinez is a legend for this." There were a few supportive messages mixed in, mostly from older gym members who remembered when Ratlifts. Iron was about more than Instagram followers and protein shake sponsorships. But they were drowned out by the chorus of people celebrating my downfall. I turned off the phone and ran a hot shower, letting the water wash away the crimson red and dirt. In the mirror afterward, I looked like hell, but I felt something I hadn't expected: clarity. Chloe was right about one thing. I had been dead weight, but not in the way she meant. I'd gotten comfortable, lazy even. Trusted too much, delegated too much, stopped paying attention to the business side of my own business. I'd let love make me stupid, and stupidity was always expensive. But comfortable was over now. 3 days later, I drove out to Roscoe's place. The old barn gym sat on 20 acres of scrubland, surrounded by rusted equipment and broken dreams. Roscoe himself was 68, built like a tree stump, with hands that could crush beer cans and a heart bigger than Texas. "Well, I'll be damned," he said when I walked in. "Heard you got yourself retired." Something like that. I looked around the barn. Ancient barbells, plates welded from scrap metal, a squat rack that looked like it belonged in a museum. "You got room for one more broken-down has-been?" "Son, this place is nothing but broken-down has-beens." Roscoe spit into a coffee can. "The question is, you planning to stay broken down, or you fixing to do something about it?" "I'm going to do something about it." "Good. Grab those 45s and let's see if you remember how to squat." The workouts at Roscoe's were different from anything I'd done in years. No mirrors, no music, no distractions. Just iron and sweat and the kind of pain that builds character instead of destroying it. The other guys who trained there were like me, men who'd been counted out, written off, forgotten by a world that valued flash over substance. There was Tommy, a former mechanic who'd lost his shop to a chain store and now worked freelance out of his garage. Big Jim, who'd bounced at the same club for 20 years until they replaced him with younger guys and better security cameras. Eddie Vasquez, an ex-MMA fighter who'd taken too many hits and now trained kids in a community center basement. None of them asked questions about my face or why I was there. They just made room at the squat rack and spotted me when the weight got heavy. After 2 weeks, my body started remembering what it felt like to be strong. The swelling in my face went down, the cuts healed, and the bruises faded to yellow-green memories. But the anger didn't fade. It refined itself, concentrated into something useful. "You're planning something," Roscoe said one evening as we were cleaning up. "I can see it in how you train, like you're preparing for a war." "Maybe I am." "War's expensive, son." "You sure you can afford it?" I thought about that question for a long time. Could I afford a war with Chloe and Kyle? They had my gym, my reputation, my wife, and the support of what felt like the entire fitness community. They had youth, energy, and the kind of ruthless ambition that made for good social media content. But they'd made one mistake. They'd left me alive, and they'd made it personal. I can't afford not to fight, I told Roscoe. He nodded slowly. And you better fight smart. Fighting smart meant understanding the battlefield. I spent 3 weeks researching Kyle and Chloe's operation, learning everything I could about their plans, their sponsors, their weaknesses. Kyle's social media presence was built on authenticity, the idea that he was just a regular guy who'd worked hard to achieve his dreams. His followers loved the rags to riches story, the idea that with enough dedication and the right supplements, they could have his life. The reality was more complicated. Kyle came from money. His father owned a chain of car dealerships across East Texas. The struggling athlete persona was carefully crafted marketing, designed to sell protein powder and workout programs to people who actually were struggling. Chloe's angle was different. She positioned herself as the business brains behind the operation, the smart woman who'd recognized Kyle's potential and helped him build his brand. Her LinkedIn was full of posts about female entrepreneurship and the importance of taking calculated risks. Neither of them knew much about actually running a gym. I learned this during my surveillance of their operation. 3 weeks after taking over Ratliff's Iron, they were already having problems. Equipment was breaking down because they'd fired the maintenance guy to save money. Membership was dropping because the old-timers didn't like the new influencer atmosphere. The books were a mess because neither of them understood basic accounting. But they were good at one thing: promotion. Kyle announced that they were organizing a regional powerlifting competition, the first ever held in our county. It would put Martinez Fitness on the map, attract sponsors, and prove that they were the future of fitness in East Texas. The competition was scheduled for 6 weeks out. Registration was already filling up, with lifters coming from as far away as Oklahoma and Louisiana. Prize money was decent, the venue looked professional in the photos, and Kyle's social media hype machine was in full swing. That's when I had my first real idea. The competition was being held at the county fairgrounds, in a building that hadn't been updated since the 1980s. The permits were handled through the county clerk's office, where a woman named Patricia Mills had been processing paperwork for 30 years. Patricia and I went to high school together. We'd even dated briefly senior year, before she went off to college and I went off to the Army. She divorced her husband 2 years ago and was raising twin daughters on a clerk's salary. I found her address and showed up at her house on a Saturday morning with coffee and kolaches from the bakery she liked. "Dean Ratliff," she said when she opened the door. "I heard about what happened." "I'm sorry." "That's actually what I wanted to talk to you about," I said. "Can I come in?" Her living room was neat but worn, furnished with hand-me-downs and garage sale finds. Pictures of her daughters covered every surface: soccer games, school plays, graduation ceremonies. Patricia looked tired but not broken, like a woman who'd learned to carry weight she never expected to bear. "I need a favor," I said. "A big one. If it's about those permits for the powerlifting thing, I can't—" "I'm not asking you to do anything illegal," I interrupted. "I'm asking you to do your job." I explained what I'd learned about the fairgrounds building. The electrical system was outdated, the loading dock wasn't up to code for heavy equipment, and the insurance coverage was questionable for an event with that many participants. "Any one of those things could shut down the competition," I said. "All I'm asking is that you do a proper inspection." Patricia was quiet for a long time. "And if the building doesn't pass? Then they'll need a new venue. And I happen to know where they can find one." The warehouse sat on 15 acres of desert scrubland, 20 miles outside of town. It had been built in the 1990s to house an auto parts distribution center that went bankrupt during the 2008 recession. Since then, it had sat empty, slowly accumulating dust and depreciation. The asking price was $180,000. I had about $30,000 in savings, plus whatever I could get for my truck and the few pieces of equipment Chloe hadn't claimed. Not nearly enough for a conventional loan, but the seller was motivated. His name was Frank Delacroix, and he'd been trying to unload the property for 6 years. He was 73, tired of paying taxes on a building that generated no income, and ready to take whatever he could get. We met at a diner halfway between his house and the warehouse. Frank was a small man with careful eyes and the kind of handshake that suggested he'd been burned before. "You want to buy my warehouse?" he said. "Why?" "I want to turn it into a powerlifting facility. There's already a gym in town. Not for long. Frank studied me over his coffee cup. You're the fellow who got pushed out of his own business. That's right. And now you want to start over. I want to finish what they started. Frank laughed, a dry sound like paper rustling. Son, revenge is expensive. You sure you can afford it? I can't afford not to try. We worked out a deal. Frank would carry the note at 6% interest, with a balloon payment due in 2 years. If I defaulted, he kept whatever I'd paid plus the improvements. If I made it work, I'd own the building free and clear. One condition, Frank said as we shook hands. You don't tell anyone I'm financing this until after the first competition. I don't need the aggravation. Deal. The next 6 weeks were the hardest of my life. During the day, I worked construction jobs to pay for materials and labor. At night, I worked on the warehouse, turning it from an empty shell into something that could host a world-class powerlifting competition. The guys from Roscoe's helped when they could. Tommy handled the electrical work, Jim managed the concrete for the platform areas, and Eddie coordinated with equipment suppliers he knew from his fighting days. Roscoe supervised everything with the eye of a man who'd built things that lasted. 3 weeks before Kyle's competition, Patricia called. I've got some bad news about your friend's event, she said, though her tone suggested she didn't consider it bad news at all. The fairgrounds building failed inspection. Electrical fire hazards, structural concerns, insurance liability issues. I can't approve the permits. That's terrible, I said. I guess they'll need to find a new venue. Funny you should mention that. Someone just registered a new facility with all the proper permits and insurance. Place called Iron Desert Powerlifting. Ever heard of it? Can't say that I have. Well, they've got availability for the exact dates your friends need. Real accommodating of them. The call from Kyle came 2 hours later. Dean, we need to talk. I don't think we have anything to talk about. The fairgrounds fell through. We need a new venue, and word is you've got something that might work. I let the silence stretch out, enjoying the desperation I could hear in his voice. I might, I said finally, but it won't be cheap. The meeting took place at a coffee shop in the middle of town, neutral territory where neither of us could claim home field advantage. Kyle arrived first, looking nervous in the way that successful people do when their success is threatened. He'd brought Chloe, which wasn't a surprise, and a man I didn't recognize in an expensive suit. Dean, Chloe said as I sat down. Her voice was carefully neutral, like we were negotiating a business deal instead of the destruction of everything we'd built together. Chloe, Kyle. I nodded to the stranger. And you are? Robert Patterson, attorney for Martinez Fitness LLC. The man's handshake was firm, but brief. I understand you have a facility that might meet our needs. I understand you have a problem that needs solving. Kyle leaned forward. Look, Dean, I know there's history between us. But this is business. We've got 300 registered competitors, sponsors flying in from Dallas and Houston, and media coverage lined up. We can't cancel now. Then don't cancel. The warehouse you bought, Chloe started. Iron Desert Powerlifting, I corrected. That's the name of the business. Whatever you want to call it, she said. We need to rent it for the weekend. I pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. Rental agreement, pretty standard terms. Patterson opened the folder and his eyebrows went up. $15,000 for 2 days? Prime real estate, premium facility, short notice? I shrugged. Supply and demand. That's highway robbery, Kyle said. That's business. I stood up. You've got 48 hours to decide. After that, I might have other interested parties. The truth was, I didn't have other interested parties. But I had something better. I had them over a barrel, and they knew it. They took 36 hours to call back, probably spending most of that time trying to find alternatives that didn't exist. When Kyle finally called, he sounded like a man swallowing broken glass. We'll take it. Cash up front. That's how my business works. $15,000 in cash plus a $5,000 damage deposit. Non-refundable. There was a long pause. Fine. Pleasure doing business with you. The money bought me more than just temporary satisfaction. It bought me credibility with the powerlifting community and leverage with the sponsors who'd backed Kyle's event. When word got out that Dean Ratliff was back in the game with a world-class facility, old relationships that had gone dormant suddenly came back to life. More importantly, it bought me information. As the landlord for Kyle's event, I had every right to be on site during setup and competition. I could watch how they operated, identify their weaknesses, and plan my next move. What I saw wasn't impressive. Kyle might have been a decent athlete, but he was a terrible event organizer. He'd underestimated setup time, overbooked the schedule, and failed to coordinate with his volunteers. By Friday evening, it was clear that Saturday's competition was going to be a disaster. The livestream setup failed during the first session. The spotters Kyle had hired were inexperienced and nearly caused 2 serious injuries. The vendor area was chaos, with companies fighting over space and power outlets. The scoring system crashed twice, and the backup was a handwritten notebook that nobody could read. By Sunday evening, Kyle's premier powerlifting event had become a cautionary tale that would be discussed in online forums for months. The sponsors were furious, the competitors were demanding refunds, and Kyle's social media was flooded with complaints and mockery. But I wasn't done with him yet. The real blow came 3 days later, when I launched Iron Desert's social media presence with a video tour of the facility. Professional lighting, professional camera work, and a message that was carefully crafted to sound humble while being anything but. Some folks have been asking about our recent event, I said, standing in front of the competition platform. I want to be clear, we were just the venue. The organizers did their best with the resources they had, and we wish them well in their future endeavors. The comments section exploded. People who'd been at Kyle's disaster of a competition shared their experiences, contrasting the quality of my facility with the chaos of Kyle's organization. #Iron Desert started trending, but not in the way Kyle wanted. His response video was uploaded 6 hours later, and it was everything I'd hoped for. Kyle, red-faced and obviously angry, standing in front of Ratliff's Iron, my old gym, trying to explain why his event had been such a failure. Some people will do anything to make others look bad, he said. Dean Ratliff charged us premium prices for a venue, then set us up to fail. The electrical problems, the equipment issues, the scheduling conflicts, that was all sabotage. It was a disaster. Kyle looked desperate, petty, and unhinged. The comments were brutal, and even his most loyal followers started questioning whether he was the kind of person they wanted to support. More importantly, his sponsors started asking questions too. The first sponsor to drop him was Pro Strength Supplements, the company that had paid for Kyle's custom gear and protein powder endorsements. Their statement was professional but devastating. Pro Strength Supplements is committed to partnering with athletes who exemplify the values of sportsmanship and professionalism. After recent events, we have decided to end our partnership with Kyle Martinez, effective immediately. Within a week, 3 more sponsors had followed suit. Kyle's social media numbers plummeted as followers jumped ship, and the brand deals that had been funding his lifestyle disappeared overnight. But the killing blow came from an unexpected source. Eddie Vasquez had been quietly documenting Kyle's steroid use for months, taking pictures at the gym, recording conversations, gathering evidence. Not because I'd asked him to, but because he'd grown up in a culture where cheating was the worst sin you could commit. The photos he'd taken showed Kyle injecting insulin and testosterone in the bathroom of Ratliff's Iron. The conversations he'd recorded featured Kyle bragging about his pharmaceutical advantage and laughing about fooling pill tests. The medical records he'd obtained through a contact at Kyle's doctor's office showed prescriptions for performance-enhancing pills that weren't medically necessary. Eddie brought everything to me on a Thursday evening, spreading it across the desk in my makeshift office like evidence in a homicide trial. This kid's been lying to everyone, Eddie said. His followers, his sponsors, his competitors. Figured you might know what to do with this. I knew exactly what to do with it. The expose went live on a Friday morning, posted simultaneously to Iron Desert's website, social media accounts, and sent directly to every major powerlifting publication in the country. The headline was simple: The Truth About Kyle Martinez, a Photo Investigation. The response was immediate and brutal. Kyle's remaining sponsors dropped him within hours. The powerlifting federations he competed in opened investigations. His social media accounts were flooded with angry comments from competitors who'd lost to him, fans who'd believed in him, and sponsors who'd been lied to. By Saturday evening, Kyle Martinez was finished as a competitive athlete and social media influencer. But Kyle wasn't the type to go quietly. The attack came on Sunday night, just after midnight. I was at Roscoe's barn, finishing up a late workout and going over plans for Iron Desert's next event. The place was empty except for me. Roscoe had gone home hours earlier, and the other guys only trained during the day. I heard the truck engines first, 2 of them pulling up outside the barn with their lights off. Then footsteps, multiple sets, trying to be quiet on the gravel driveway. I turned off the music and listened, my heart rate spiking as I recognized the sound of people trying not to be heard. Kyle's voice carried through the night air. He's got to be in there. Truck's here. Lights are on. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, then thought better of it. By the time the sheriff's department got out here, whatever was going to happen would be over. And if Kyle wanted to finish this with violence, maybe it was time to accommodate him. The barn had 3 entrances, front door, back door, and a loading bay on the east side. I could hear them splitting up, surrounding the building like they were planning a military operation. Kyle might have been a steroid-enhanced pretty boy, but he wasn't stupid, and he'd brought enough muscle to handle one middle-aged gym owner. Or so he thought. The front door opened first, slow and careful. Kyle stepped inside, followed by the same 2 goons who'd helped him kick me behind the gym 6 weeks earlier. They'd brought weapons this time, crowbars and baseball bats that glinted in the fluorescent lights. "Dean," Kyle called out. "We need to have a conversation." I was hiding behind the squat rack, watching them through the spaces between the weight plates. Kyle looked different, thinner, older, like the stress of the past week had aged him 5 years. His 2 friends looked nervous but determined, the way men do when they're about to do something they know is wrong, but feel they have to do anyway. "You destroyed my life," Kyle shouted. "My career, my sponsors, my reputation, everything I worked for." "You destroyed your own life," I called back, staying hidden. "I just helped people see what you really were." "Bees!" Kyle swung his bat at a rack of dumbbells, sending them crashing to the floor. "You set me up from the beginning. The warehouse, the competition, all of it." The back door opened, and another figure slipped inside. Not one of Kyle's guys. This one was smaller, moving differently. It took me a second to recognize Eddie Vasquez, probably drawn by the noise or the truck engines. Eddie caught my eye and held up his phone, showing me that he was recording. Smart man. Whatever happened next, there would be evidence. "Where are you, Dean?" Kyle was walking deeper into the barn, his friends flanking him. "Let's finish this, like men." "Like men?" I stood up, stepping out from behind the squat rack. "Men don't gang up 3 against 1 with weapons. Men don't ruin other people's lives with lies and sabotage." I didn't lie about anything. Those pictures were real. Those recordings were real. And your steroid use was real. All I did was show people the truth. Kyle's face twisted with rage. "The truth? You want the truth?" "The truth is you're a washed-up has-been who couldn't handle being replaced by someone younger and better." He charged at me with the bat, swinging it like he was trying to knock a fastball out of the park. I sidestepped and grabbed a 45-pound plate from the rack, using it as a shield. The bat rang off the steel like a bell, the vibration probably stinging Kyle's hands. His friends joined the attack, crowbars swinging in clumsy arcs that would have been deadly if they'd connected. But these weren't fighters. They were gym rats who'd watched too many action movies and never been in a real fight. I threw the weight plate at the closest one, catching him in the chest and sending him stumbling backward into a rack of barbells. The crash was enormous, steel clanging against steel, weight plates rolling across the concrete floor. The second goon tried to flank me, but I'd been training in this barn for weeks. I knew every piece of equipment, every blind spot, every advantage the space offered. I grabbed a 20-pound dumbbell and threw it at his knees, dropping him in a screaming heap. That left Kyle. He was bigger than me, younger, and probably stronger on paper. But he'd spent years relying on chemicals to build his strength, and chemicals don't teach you how to fight. He swung the bat again, wild and desperate, and I stepped inside his reach. The headbutt broke his nose with a wet, cracking sound. Warm liquid sprayed across both of us, and Kyle stumbled backward, dropping the bat. Before he could recover, I grabbed him by the shirt and drove him backward into the concrete wall. "You want to know what dead weight really is?" I said, slamming him against the wall again. Dead weight is someone who takes credit for other people's work. Dead weight is someone who lies to their fans and cheats their competitors. Dead weight is someone who steals another man's wife and business and thinks there won't be consequences. Kyle tried to knee me in the groin, but I turned sideways and took it on the thigh. Then I grabbed him by the throat and squeezed until his face started turning purple. "You're going to leave town," I said. "You're going to disappear from social media, from powerlifting, from my life. And if I ever see you again, I won't be so gentle." I let him drop to the floor, gasping and bleeding. His two friends were still down, one unconscious and the other whimpering about his leg. Eddie stepped out of the shadows, still recording, his camera capturing everything that had happened. "Jesus, Dean," Eddie said. "You okay?" "I'm fine." I looked down at Kyle, who was trying to crawl toward the door. "We're done here." Kyle managed to get his friends on their feet and out of the barn, leaving behind crimson-red stains and broken equipment. As their truck engines faded into the distance, I realized I was shaking, not from fear but from the adrenaline rush of finally fighting back. "You think they'll call the cops?" Eddie asked. "And admit they broke into someone else's property with weapons? I doubt it." Eddie looked at his phone. "Got the whole thing recorded. Self-defense clear as day." "Good. Hang on to that footage. Something tells me this isn't over." But I was wrong about that. It was over, at least as far as Kyle was concerned. He left town 3 days later, taking his broken nose and his ruined reputation with him. Word was he'd gone back to his father's car dealership in Houston, trading his dreams of fitness stardom for a desk job selling Toyotas. I never saw him again. With Kyle gone, I expected Chloe to give up the fight. I was wrong about that, too. She doubled down, hiring a lawyer and filing for an injunction to prevent me from using the name Ratliff's Iron in any form. She claimed trademark infringement, breach of contract, and about 6 other legal theories that sounded impressive but didn't hold water. Her lawyer was expensive, but not particularly good. He'd graduated from a mid-tier law school 20 years earlier and spent most of his career handling divorces and DUIs. Corporate law was outside his wheelhouse, and it showed. My lawyer was different. Sarah Kim had grown up poor in Dallas, worked her way through law school at night, and built a practice specializing in small business disputes. She was 5 feet tall, wore designer suits that probably cost more than my truck, and had a reputation for making opposing lawyers cry. "This is interesting," Sarah said, reviewing Chloe's filing during our first meeting. "She's claiming ownership of intellectual property that predates her involvement with your business by 15 years. Is that a problem?" "For her, absolutely. For us, it's a gift," Sarah smiled. And I understood why other lawyers were afraid of her. "She's essentially admitting that she stole your business through fraudulent means. We can not only defeat her injunction, we can countersue for everything she's taken." The legal battle took 3 months, during which Chloe tried everything she could think of to destroy me. She posted negative reviews of Iron Desert on every platform she could find. She contacted my insurance company with false claims about safety violations. She even tried to get the health department to shut me down by claiming I was operating a food service business without proper permits. None of it worked. Sarah had taught me to document everything, and every attack Chloe launched just provided more evidence of her malicious intent. The final hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in November. I arrived early, wearing the only suit I owned and carrying a folder full of evidence that Sarah had assembled into a devastating case. Chloe looked different. Thinner, older, like the stress of fighting a war she couldn't win had taken its toll. She was alone. No Kyle, no expensive lawyer, just her and a public defender who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Your Honor," Sarah began, "this case is about more than trademark infringement. It's about a systematic campaign of fraud, theft, and maltreatment designed to destroy a legitimate business and its owner." She laid out the timeline methodically. How Chloe had tricked me into signing away my ownership rights. How she and Kyle had conspired to steal my business. How they'd used violence and intimidation when legal theft wasn't enough. How Chloe had continued her maltreatment campaign, even after Kyle fled town. The evidence was overwhelming. Recorded conversations, financial documents, medical records from my kicking, Eddie's video footage of the barn fight, screenshots of Chloe's social media attacks. Everything painted a picture of a woman who'd lost her mind to greed and spite. "The defendant's actions go beyond simple business misconduct," Sarah continued. "They constitute a pattern of criminal behavior designed to destroy not just Mr. Ratliff's business, but his reputation, his livelihood, and his physical safety. Chloe's public defender tried to mount a defense, but his heart wasn't in it. How do you defend the indefensible? How do you explain away recorded confessions and video evidence? When it was over, the judge didn't even need to deliberate. "I find in favor of the plaintiff on all counts," she said. "The defendant is hereby ordered to cease all use of the plaintiff's intellectual property, pay damages in the amount of $50,000, and comply with a permanent restraining order prohibiting any further contact or maltreatment. But the real victory came 2 weeks later when the bank foreclosed on Ratliff's iron. Chloe had been so focused on fighting me that she'd neglected the business side of running a gym. Membership had collapsed after Kyle's steroid scandal, sponsor money had dried up, and the monthly expenses had continued piling up whether she could pay them or not. The foreclosure notice was posted on a Friday morning. By Friday afternoon, I was at the bank with a cashier's check and a purchase offer. "You want to buy back your own gym?" the loan officer asked. "I want to buy a piece of property that's about to go to auction," I corrected. What the previous owner called it doesn't matter to me. The price was 60% of what I'd originally built the place for, reflecting both the distressed sale and the damage Chloe's mismanagement had done to the business. I paid cash, using the money from Iron Desert's first successful competition and the damages award from Chloe's lawsuit. On Monday morning, I stood in front of the building that had been my life's work, holding the deed and a set of new keys. The sign above the door still read, "Martinez Fitness," but that would change by afternoon. The interior was worse than I'd expected. Equipment was broken or missing, the floors were stained and scarred, and the whole place smelled like neglect and failure. It would take months of work and thousands of dollars to restore it to what it had been. But it was mine again. I found Chloe in the parking lot that evening, sitting in her car and staring at the building like she couldn't quite believe it was gone. When she saw me walking toward her, she rolled down the window. "Satisfied?" she asked. "Getting there." She looked older than her 34 years, worn down by months of fighting a war she couldn't win. "I loved you, you know. For a while, anyway." "No, you didn't. You loved what I could give you. When someone better came along, you traded up." "Kyle was never better than you." "Then why did you choose him?" She was quiet for a long time. "Because he was young and exciting and made me feel like I was somebody special." "Because you'd gotten comfortable, and comfortable felt like dying? So you eliminated us both instead." "I guess I did." She started the car. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry." "No, you're not. You're sorry you lost." "There's a difference." She drove away without another word, taillights disappearing into the Texas darkness. I never saw her again either. The grand reopening of Ratliff's Iron took place on a Saturday morning in February, 6 months after Kyle and Chloe had tried to bury me. The weather was perfect. Clear skies, mild temperature, the kind of day that made you glad to be alive in Texas. I'd spent those 6 months rebuilding everything they'd destroyed. New equipment, refinished floors, fresh paint, updated electrical systems. But more than that, I'd rebuilt the culture that made the place special. The old members came back first. Men and women who'd been training with me for years before the chaos started. People who understood that a gym was more than just a place to work out. It was a community, a second home, a place where you could be yourself without pretense or judgment. Tommy had installed a sound system that could shake the building when needed, but usually played classic rock at a volume that allowed for conversation. Jim had built new benches and squat racks from steel he'd salvaged from construction sites, pieces that would last longer than the building itself. Eddie had started teaching self-defense classes in the back room, showing people how to protect themselves the way I'd learned to protect myself. Roscoe was there for the reopening, of course, wearing a clean shirt for the occasion and grinning like a proud father. "Looks good, son," he said, surveying the transformed space. "Looks like home." The crowd was bigger than I'd expected. Word had spread through the powerlifting community about what had happened, and people had driven from all over Texas to show their support. Some were competitors I'd known for years. Others were strangers who'd heard the story and wanted to see how it ended. Sarah Kim was there too, still in her designer suit but looking more relaxed than I'd ever seen her. "Nice work," she said. "Both on the gym and on the legal strategy. You fight smarter than most of my clients." I had good advice. "You had good instincts. The advice just helped you trust them." As the day wore on and the crowd grew larger, I found myself thinking about Kyle and Chloe and the choices that had brought us all to this point. They'd wanted to cut away the dead weight, to build something modern and efficient and profitable, and maybe they would have succeeded if they'd been honest about it. But success built on lies doesn't last. Eventually, the truth comes out, and when it does, everything built on deception collapses under its own weight. The real celebrations started after the official ceremonies ended. Someone had brought beer, someone else had brought barbecue, and soon the gym had transformed into the kind of party where strangers became friends and old friends became family. I was standing by the front window, watching the sunset paint the Texas sky in shades of orange and purple, when Eddie walked over with 2 bottles of beer. "So, what's next?" he asked. "You got your gym back, you got your revenge, you proved your point. What do you do now?" It was a good question. For months, my entire focus had been on fighting back, on proving that I wasn't dead weight, on showing Kyle and Chloe that they'd made a mistake. Now that the war was over, I had to figure out what winning actually meant. "I keep lifting," I said finally. "I keep training people who want to get stronger. I keep building something that lasts. That's it? That's everything." Eddie clinked his bottle against mine. "Simple plan." "I like it." As the evening wound down and people started heading home, I did one final walkthrough of the gym. Everything was clean, everything was in its place, everything was ready for Monday morning and the work that would begin again. In the back office, I found the folder where I kept the important documents: the deed to the building, the insurance policies, the membership contracts. At the very back, I found the note Chloe had left for me that first morning, the one about the divorce papers. I read it one more time, then tore it into small pieces and threw it in the trash. Some weights weren't worth carrying anymore. Spring came early that year, bringing with it the kind of weather that made you want to spend all your time outdoors. The gym was busier than it had ever been, filled with people who understood that strength wasn't just about numbers on a barbell. It was about the will to keep going when everything seemed hopeless. I was training 5 days a week again, chasing personal records I hadn't attempted in years. At 43, I was stronger than I'd been at 30, not because my body was better, but because my mind was clearer. When you know exactly what you're fighting for, every rep has purpose. The regional powerlifting circuit had taken notice too. Iron Desert's competitions were becoming legendary for their organization, their atmosphere, and their ability to bring out the best in every competitor. We'd hosted 4 events so far, each one bigger and more successful than the last. It was after the 4th competition, a state qualifier that had drawn lifters from across the Southwest, that I got the call that would change everything. "Mr. Ratliff, this is Jennifer Walsh from USA Powerlifting. I have a proposition for you." USA Powerlifting was the sport's national governing body, the organization that sanctioned major competitions and selected teams for international events. Getting a call from them was like getting a call from the major leagues. "We've been watching what you've built in Texas," Jennifer continued. "The quality of your events, the way you handle logistics, the atmosphere you create. We'd like to offer you the opportunity to host next year's national championships." The national championships, the biggest powerlifting competition in the country, with over 1,000 competitors and tens of thousands of spectators. Prize money in the 6 figures, media coverage, sponsorship opportunities that could transform Iron Desert from a regional success story into a national powerhouse. "I'm interested," I said. "What would it involve?" The requirements were staggering. I'd need to expand my facility, hire additional staff, coordinate with hotels and restaurants, manage media credentials, and handle security for an event that would dwarf anything I'd done before. But the rewards were equally staggering. The hosting fee alone would be enough to pay off my loans and build a financial foundation that could support the gym for decades. The publicity would establish Iron Desert as one of the premier powerlifting venues in the world. "I'll need some time to consider this," I told Jennifer. "Of course. But I should mention, there's been some opposition to our choice. Some people in the organization feel that someone with your history might not be the right fit for such a prestigious event." "What kind of history? The situation with your former business partner and athlete?" "Some board members are concerned about the controversy." I felt the old anger stirring, but I kept my voice level. "What situation would that be?" "The allegations of sabotage, the legal disputes, the physical altercations. Some people feel that kind of drama reflects poorly on the sport." "I see. And what do you think?" Jennifer was quiet for a moment. "I think that anyone who can rebuild their life from nothing, create something as impressive as what you've built, and handle themselves with the kind of class you've shown throughout this process is exactly the kind of person we want representing our sport. But I'm just one voice on the board. How many voices are against me? Enough to make this a fight. The board meets next month to make the final decision. If you want this opportunity, you're going to have to convince them that you're worth the risk. After Jennifer hung up, I sat in my office for a long time, staring at the walls covered with photos from competitions, certificates from sanctioning, bodies and newspaper clippings documenting Iron Desert's rise. Everything I'd built, everything I'd fought for was represented in those pictures. But now, someone wanted to take it away again, not through deception or violence, but through whispers and politics and the kind of cowardice that hides behind committee decisions. I thought about Kyle, probably still selling cars in Houston and telling anyone who would listen about how he'd been sabotaged by a jealous rival. I thought about Chloe, living off the alimony from her first marriage and the settlement from our divorce, spinning stories about the vindictive ex-husband who'd destroyed her dreams. Their version of events was cleaner, more comfortable for people who didn't want to think too hard about who was really at fault. The older man who couldn't handle being replaced, the bitter divorcee who'd used his connections to destroy young love, the establishment figure who'd crushed innovation because it threatened his position. It was all lies. But lies are often more appealing than truth. The USA Powerlifting Board meeting was held in a conference room at a hotel near the Dallas airport. 15 people sitting around a polished table, reviewing financial projections and site inspection reports like they were deciding the fate of nations instead of choosing where to hold a weightlifting competition. I arrived early, wearing my best suit and carrying a presentation folder that Sarah had helped me prepare. The facts were on my side. Iron Desert had the facilities, the experience, and the track record to host a world-class event. But I knew that facts weren't always enough. "Mr. Ratliff," Jennifer said as I entered the room, "thank you for coming. I think you know most of the board members already." I recognized about half the faces. Officials from competitions I'd attended over the years, former athletes who'd transitioned into administration, business people who'd made their fortunes in related industries. The other half were strangers, which probably wasn't a good sign. "Before we begin," said a man I didn't recognize, "I think we should address the elephant in the room. Mr. Ratliff, there have been some concerns raised about your suitability as a host for our premier event." "What kind of concerns?" "Reports of unethical business practices, personal vendettas, and violent behavior. The kind of controversies that could reflect poorly on our organization." I had prepared for this moment, but it still felt like being punched in the stomach. "Could you be more specific about these reports?" "We've received several complaints from individuals who claim you used underhanded tactics to sabotage their business and destroy their reputations. From Kyle Martinez and Chloe Ratliff, among others." I opened my presentation folder and pulled out the first document. This is a court judgment awarding me damages for fraud, theft, and maltreatment. The defendants were Kyle Martinez and Chloe Ratliff. The judge found that they had systematically stolen my business through deceptive practices. I passed copies around the table. This is a police report documenting an attack that took place behind my original gym. The perpetrators were Kyle Martinez and 2 associates. I was hospitalized with multiple injuries. More documents. This is video evidence of a break-in at my training facility, during which Kyle Martinez and his associates attacked me with weapons. The incident was recorded by a witness and clearly shows self-defense on my part. The room was quiet as the board members reviewed the evidence. Some looked surprised, others embarrassed. A few appeared to be reconsidering their positions. "These are serious allegations," the man who'd questioned me said, "but they represent only one side of the story. Then let me tell you the other side." I stood up, making eye contact with each board member in turn. 6 months ago, I was a broken man. My wife had left me, my business was gone, my reputation was destroyed. I had every reason to give up, to disappear, to accept that I was exactly what they said I was, dead weight. But I didn't give up. I went back to basics, back to the iron, back to the things that made me who I was before success made me soft. I rebuilt my body, my business, and my life from the ground up. Not through shortcuts or deception, but through honest work and refusing to quit. I gestured toward the presentation materials spread across the table. Iron Desert isn't just a gym or a competition venue. It's proof that you can lose everything and still come back stronger. It's proof that integrity matters more than image, that substance beats style, that the truth always wins in the end. The people who tried to destroy me are gone. Kyle Martinez is selling cars. Chloe Ratliff is living off settlement money. They got what they wanted in the short term, but they couldn't hold on to it because it wasn't really theirs. What I've built is different. It's built on relationships, on reputation earned through actions rather than words, on the kind of foundation that lasts. The question isn't whether I'm suitable to host your championship. The question is whether your championship is worthy of what we've built. I sat down, my heart pounding but my voice steady. Around the table, I could see the board members processing what I'd said, weighing my words against the whispers they'd heard. Jennifer smiled slightly. Are there any other questions for Mr. Ratliff? An older woman near the end of the table raised her hand. Mr. Ratliff, if we award you this championship, how can we be sure there won't be any more drama? Because the people who created the drama are gone. What's left is just me, my gym, and a commitment to giving every competitor the best possible experience. That's all I've ever wanted to do. The vote was closer than I'd hoped, but clearer than I'd feared. 9 in favor, 6 opposed. Enough to win, enough to prove that truth still mattered more than politics. Congratulations, Mr. Ratliff, Jennifer said as the meeting adjourned. The 2026 National Championships will be held at Iron Desert Powerlifting. As I drove home through the Texas night, windows down and music playing, I thought about the journey that had brought me to this point. 12 months ago, I'd been lying in a pool of red liquid behind my own gym, knockin' and broken and apparently finished. Now I was hosting the biggest powerlifting competition in the country. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. Sometimes it's getting better. The 2026 National Championships exceeded every expectation. Over 1,500 competitors, 20,000 spectators, live television coverage, and media attention that put Iron Desert on the map permanently. For 3 days, the little warehouse in the Texas desert was the center of the powerlifting universe. But the real satisfaction came from smaller moments. Watching newcomers hit personal records on the same platform where world champions set new standards. Seeing old friends embrace after years of training together. Listening to competitors talk about how the atmosphere at Iron Desert made them feel like they could lift more than they ever thought possible. On the final evening, after the awards ceremony and the closing celebration, I found myself alone in the gym for the first time in weeks. The platforms were empty, the crowds were gone, and the building was quiet except for the hum of the air conditioning and the distant sound of traffic on the highway. I walked through the space, checking equipment, turning off lights, making sure everything was secure for the night. In the morning, there would be cleanup crews and equipment rental returns and about 1,000 other details to handle. But for now, it was just me and the iron and the satisfaction of a job well done. My phone buzzed with a text message. I expected it to be from one of the staff members or maybe a congratulatory note from a competitor. Instead, it was from a number I didn't recognize. Saw the competition on TV. Looks like you did okay for yourself. K. Kyle. After more than a year of silence, he was reaching out like we were old friends who'd simply lost touch. No apology, no acknowledgement of what he'd done. Just a casual observation like he was commenting on the weather. I stared at the message for a long time, thinking about how to respond. A year ago, I would have been furious. 6 months ago, I might have been tempted to gloat. But now, standing in the gym I'd built from nothing, surrounded by evidence of what persistence and integrity could accomplish, I felt something I hadn't expected. Pity. Kyle had traded his potential for shortcuts, his reputation for temporary success, his future for immediate gratification. He'd had everything handed to him: natural talent, financial support, mentorship from someone who genuinely wanted to help him succeed, and he'd thrown it all away for a few months of social media fame and the temporary thrill of taking someone else's life. Now he was selling cars in Houston while I was hosting national championships. He was living with the consequences of his choices while I was building something that would last. I deleted the message without responding. Some conversations aren't worth having. I turned off the last light and walked toward the exit, my footsteps echoing in the empty building. Outside, the Texas sky was clear and full of stars, the kind of night that made you grateful to be alive and exactly where you were supposed to be. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new people to train and mentor and help become stronger than they thought possible. There would be equipment to maintain, bills to pay, competitions to organize, and all the mundane responsibilities that came with building something real. But tonight, I was content to lock the door behind me and drive home through the desert, knowing that I'd carried the weight and emerged stronger for it. Some people get crushed under the pressure, others learn to lift it. The difference isn't talent or luck or circumstance. The difference is refusing to quit when quitting would be easier. The difference is understanding that dead weight gets cut, but real strength endures. I drove into the darkness, leaving the lights of Iron Desert behind me, carrying nothing but the knowledge that I'd built something worth keeping and the quiet satisfaction of a man who'd proven that sometimes the good guys actually win.